If I'm telling you that if you cooperate with me and everything you tell us turns out to be true, I'll advocate for leniency at your sentencing. You have to believe that first and foremost from me. And so that was the key thing. And then the other thing is what I was just alluding to, which is talking people through the incentives. You have to recognize people are only going to do things that are in their self-interest. And so you have to talk them through and persuade them that it is in their self-interest, some of which will be carrot and some of which will be stick. Stick being, you're going to get convicted. You're going to go to jail for this amount of time. Again, you have to believe me. But if you see me as a fearmonger, it doesn't matter what I tell you about the consequences of not cooperating. So I would say those two things, which are developing trust and being able to persuade people that it is in their interest to talk.
And you were pretty good at this because you had 13 international terrorism cases through your career and you won all of them.
Me and large teams of other people, other prosecutors, the federal agents who investigated the cases, often the foreign counterparts, both prosecution and police that we worked with. I did a big case that went to trial in New York with the Greater Manchester Police, favorite police in the world. So yes, me and large teams of other extremely talented people. And
your job in the courtroom is to persuade the jury that the evidence you have proves the defendant's guilt, right? So how did you go about doing this? Because it's these cases are complex. So how did you go about making a jury understand that complexity, being able to process it and then come to a conclusion?
You have to simplify it first and foremost. And one of the things that I was taught early on as a prosecutor, even in just the context of a more run-of-the-mill federal case, was when you do your opening statement, and that's the first thing the jury hears from you about the case, right? So that's when you tell them, this is why you're here, this is the evidence we're going to present, this is what we think the evidence is going to prove. You sort of give them a preview. One of the first tips that I got that I've used throughout my career is say as few names as possible then. For the simple reason that what you really want them to keep track of is your theory of the case, right? That so-and-so did it, and here's how you know they do it. It's not going to matter whether or not they remember at that stage in time that Bob, John, and Harry are going to testify that so-and-so did it. It's going to matter that they know there's a lot of witnesses coming, some of whom are involved in the crime, other of whom are medical examiners. So it's sort of one general simplifying tip that I think has broader implications, because you have to distill the case down to what they need to know to understand the crime and to understand why, when you're a prosecutor, their evidence shows that the person is guilty of the crime. So that's kind of the first thing I would say. The second thing is it's kind of hard to appreciate unless you really watched a trial, and this is true for criminal and civil trials, both, how actually disjointed testimony can be, because ultimately you have elements of the offense and you need to offer proof of all the various elements, but it comes in through so many different forms that, you'll have a medical examiner on the stand talking about this blood stain matches that, but you won't have called the other witness yet who talks about how there was a blood stain. And so the story can easily not come out in a narrative way, even if you get all your evidence in there, just because you have to get it in, at least in the U.S. legal system, through specific witnesses and specific pieces of evidence. So it's not like you can just call somebody and say, what's their evidence and what's their theory of guilt? You've got to call the guy who has the chain of custody for the box to put in the box, and you have to call someone else who examined the box and found the defendant's fingerprints, and you have to call someone else who said, that's the box I saw him running away from the crime with, for example. So one of the other things that you really try to do is impose as much of a narrative as you can on it. So the order in which you present witnesses is important, just so that the jury can sort of follow and track. And the way that when you're putting witnesses on the stand, prepare them to testify. You want to think through what's going to tell the story in the cleanest way. Is it chronological? Do I elicit first the sort of central facts so they know why this woman is on the stand because, she saw the shooting? Or do I sort of take them through the whole story of what she was doing on the morning of this day, and then she went to the bodega and what happened next? Like that sort of thing. You have to really think through to the extent possible. Now, you're working with witnesses' schedules and limited court dates, so it's not always as easy as it sounds, but it's really worth the effort.